So it wasn't just business, because the thing is, when you start a business, it's like your baby, right? So it's like you are so attached to it. And so somebody just comes and tries to knock it off, or maybe they try to hurt your business, they spread lies, like all of these things, it really takes a toll on your mental health and psyche. And I never even saw that as a possibility.
Hello and welcome to the Mindset and Self Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan, and today on the show I have Natalie Mullin. Natalie, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. I'm glad that you're on. I think we were going through technology, and anybody who has any feelings about any sort of technology wouldn't be listening to the show if they didn't have any sort of technology anyway. But we've all dealt with something. My grandparents came to mind because I'm like, man, they're in their 80s, and if I asked them to listen to a podcast, they'd be like, what? Like, I've had to tell them, like, it's basically like an online radio show. They're like, yeah, I remember radio. Like, all right, cool. Well, we were riffing about technology, and I'm really glad that you're here because this is the second attempt. We were going to have a call a while back, and when we started to go through the tech stuff, I was like, man, please don't tell me we need to reschedule because we were already having a good conversation. So, Natalie, why don't you kick us off? Tell us what you do for a living, and what's one thing that most people don't know about you that's maybe a little odd or bizarre.
Okay, so thank you so much, Nick, for having me. My name is Natalie Mullin, and I do a couple of things. So one, I'm a teacher, but I'm just about to transition out of that field, and I'm going to be starting something completely new, which is going to be sales for a tech company. So I'm really excited for that. And then I'm also a wellness coach, and I support women who are looking for more balance in their lives. And something that people don't know about me, or some people don't know about me, is that I was living in Antigua for a bit. It's a tiny little country, only about 90,000 people in the Caribbean. And I decided to quit my teaching job, and I opened up a bubble tea business on the side of the road, literally selling from a tent. And I was able to grow it to 3 different locations by the end of it. And so that was like a cool but random thing. And I gave up my teaching job to do that, which at the time people were like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And I'm about to do it again. So that's me in a nutshell.
It sounds like a pattern, which is a good pattern, especially as an entrepreneur. Like, you start something, you get the itch, and then you keep going. Did you also do anything like that when you were a little kid, like lemonade stands or selling
I
stuff?
didn't do lemonade, but I used to braid hair. I used to make bracelets. I just would find ways to charge people for things. They're like I don't know. I was very money driven, and I was like, okay, I need money for this. So it's like if someone's gonna ask me, I used to sell my snacks, like all those like little things. It's like I have this passion flaky. They want it. How much do you want for it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a happy exchange.
What a cool thing. I love that. And it's cool to hear about when somebody has a successful business they've had for a long time, they've done all this stuff. But then I like to know, like, what did it take to get there? And like, what sort of shitty random businesses do you have that when you think back, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, or I forgot that I did that thing. Like,
Yeah.
even as you say about a bubble tea, I forgot that for a summer, my dad and brother and I had an ice cream shop, an
Oh,
ice cream and water ice shop. But it was like,
I love
it
that.
was a summer. It was one season
Yeah.
because we were like, hey, we got this extra space. What if we cram sugar and people in there? Like, all right. But what a cool thing, because that's even one of those things that helps you get into something else or
Yeah.
helps you learn things. So the, I know when we were first talking, you had said your odd thing was something different. I'm glad you went with the bubble tea because
Okay.
how did you get to bubble tea and why bubble tea?
Okay. So I'll tell you. So funny enough, that business came out of a failed business. So first they decided to start a tea bag business, like for actual hot
Yeah.
teas. And it was a really good idea, and it was really good teas, and I custom made the flavors. I put all this work into it. But it was the branding for the teas was based on the Caribbean, and it just didn't really work to sell like mainstream, right? It was more like a souvenir product, and so I kind of had a hard time distributing it, and it's a lot of work to do a business. And I was in Antigua, so shipping issues and trying to get it, and the cost of doing business when you're not in, for instance, North America or something like that, you kind of take certain things for granted.
Yeah.
But from that business, I remember I was with my friend and we were just walking down the street, and she was like, oh, there's a bubble tea place. Do you want to try it? And I was like, well, I've never had an interest in bubble tea, but I have a tea business. So
Oh,
sure, it's kind of related. Let me try it. And I went in and I remember they gave me a sample of something and it had the little tapioca balls. And I remember tasting it and spitting it right out. And I was like, this is disgusting. Like, I can't do it. And I remember the lady was like, oh, no, let me give you something else. And I was like, nope, I never
Not
want
after
bubble
that.
tea again. And she was like, no, give me one more chance. So she gave me a different drink and it had these little passion fruit jellies in it. And I took one sip of it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. This is delicious. I was just on vacation in Canada at the time, but I was living in Antigua. And I was like, they don't have this in Antigua. I'm going to bring it there. And I think 2 days later, stuff was ordered and shipped to Antigua. So by the time I got back from my vacation, the stuff was already there for me. We got a tent, we got a table, and that was kind of the beginning. Googling, how do I start a bubble tea business? The first day, we set up the tent. We forgot the sugar. So that was an interesting story. But it's okay because we didn't really have any customers either. We just gave away a bunch of sugarless bubble tea. And now I love bubble tea. It's one of my absolute favorite drinks. Even the tapioca balls, absolutely love them. So yeah, it was a really interesting rodeo.
Well, bubble tea is an odd thing if you're not used to drinking it. And I've done the same thing. Like I remember the first time I drank it, I was like, why is this straw like 4 foot wide? What the hell's in here? What are all these little things? And the person I was with at the time was just like, just shut up, just drink it. I was like, all right, one of those tapioca balls in the back of your throat, and you're like, what's that? What is that? I like tapioca. I couldn't tell you even the last time I had tapioca pudding, but like thinking of those being huge, I'm like, how did somebody think about that? Like, who was like, you know what? We've got this pudding or this tapioca. Let's put it in a drink and let's slurp these things up. Like, what a weird thing. But
Yeah. Are they the same thing? I don't even, because I do like tapioca pudding, but I feel like those like ball things are much smaller in the
much
pudding.
smaller. They're teeny
Yeah.
tiny. But I mean, makes sense. It's like just the bubble tea is like 5 times, 6 times the size of those. So
Yeah.
imagine the bowl of tapioca pudding you could have with those big ass balls, you know?
I know.
But it's an odd thing, and if you're not used to it. Once I've had a lot of people that have tried it. Like I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and there was a bubble tea place like right around the corner. So I'd grab a strawberry milk bubble tea every few days as like a little dessert or whatever. And there were people that would stop by, and I would see them be like, I don't know, and they'd like try this little bit, and same deal where they would have kind of that look like, ugh, no, I'm good, and they would walk out. Or other people were like, this is great. But what a cool thing for you to be able to not only experience that, but then to pull the trigger and say, all right, we're going to do this and I'm going to start selling this thing. Because again, that's like another step to be able to get you to something else. If you
Yeah.
look back from where you're at now, all the steps it took to be able to get to where you're at, it's funny when people say, like, if you knew all those steps, would you still do it? Because most people would be like, fuck no. Like, that took a lot out of me or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially when you have your own business. Like I think you get excited about an idea.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, let's go for it. And then, you're seeing it through and you're like, okay, you meet a couple hiccups and you're like, it's okay, I can overcome, I can persevere. And then stuff really starts to just get wonky. And you're like, why am I doing this? And the thing is, if other people know about your business, it's more pressure because then people are watching you,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, oh, I have to keep up the business now. Everybody's looking at me. And then you have like this internal battle. Well, I did. I don't know if everybody goes through this. I had this battle of like, I don't even want to do this anymore. But then I'm like, but I have to do this because I have my customers. I like everybody knows about my business. I'm the only one on the island offering this. People want it to grow more. So, and I went through a lot of like not fun stuff. Like starting that business, like we had a friendship that just totally got destroyed through the business and wasn't expecting that at all. And I had a lot of people copy my business idea, but like verbatim. I mean, like I would walk by and be like, is that my business? Like, like they wouldn't even try to like, let's just change it up, and Antigua's a little bit different in terms of intellectual property and copyrights and how you maintain trademarks and stuff like that. Island life is a little bit different. So that really hurt me on a personal level. So it wasn't just business, because the thing is, when you start a business, it's like your baby, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you are so attached to it, and so somebody just comes and tries to knock it off, or maybe they try to hurt your business, they spread lies, like all of these things, it really takes a toll on your mental health and psyche. And I never even saw that as a possibility. all I wanted to do was sell bubble tea.
But for you to be able to go through that, deal with that, and continue to take that beating in a sense. In certain ways, I think entrepreneurs are kind of sadists. Like, we enjoy the fight. Like, you want to fucking hit me? Hit me.
Yeah,
I'll show you
like,
what I got.
I'll
Sort
get
of deal.
back up. Yeah.
Exactly. You remember, you hit me once, and I hit you once, and then you hit the ground, or whatever it's going to be, you know? But even with those, not physically, but just like the situations where this stuff happens, and I've seen a lot of people over the course of my life that have said, and like leaned on the fact that they were an entrepreneur, but didn't really have what it took to be an entrepreneur. Like, we experienced that, and I say we as just basically the global group here in
Yeah.
2020 when the pandemic hit. So many people were like, "Oh, I want to start a company. I want to start a business," and they're not really sure how to actually do it. And I think it's a good thing for us to be able to get into as business owners. We can understand what this shit looks like, and especially from a wellness side and coach, I assume it's one person, you, and maybe a few people that help with certain things, which is different than having an agency or having a
Yeah.
services business or an actual products business where you need all these different people. It takes different levels of thought and compassion and empathy to be able to work with those people and not drive yourself crazy. And that's what I like
Yeah.
to be able to get into when it comes to this stuff, because those people that either started a company in 2020 and are still doing it, maybe this is their first business. For me, it was not my first business. It just happened to make sense to be able to do the things that I did at that time. But there are people that got into it, started it, and ended it within a few months, like podcasting. There's so many people that started a podcast and then realized this shit is tough.
Yeah.
It's
a lot of
hard.
work.
Yeah. There's a lot of work, not only getting guests, but doing the production of it, doing it the right way. When I've talked to people, they're like, "Yeah, I had a podcast." I'm like, "How did it go? Like, what did it do?" They're like, "I just wanted to hit play on the microphone and just record it and do the thing, but everything else sucked." And then there are other people that love all the details and the fights to it. So let's talk about some of the stuff that you've been through, not only with that business, but being able to look back and thinking from the perspective of somebody that is going through that and really struggling in a way of like, do I keep pushing with this thing because I have a passion for it, but I feel like I'm losing my soul, or just kind of being burnt out? What are the things
Yeah.
that come to mind as I talk about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because this is kind of why I got into being a wellness coach in the first place. Because, and now I'll go backwards for a sec, my business kind of didn't end in the way I expected. So I was an ambitious person. I still am an ambitious person, but I was very ambitious, very driven. And I was so focused on my business, but also trying to balance all the other areas of life. Balance being married and being a wife. Balance, I was just coming out of teaching, but I was still teaching at the beginning when I had the business. And then balance my social life and all these things. And I was being pulled in all these different directions. And sometimes, like, you don't even realize that you're running out of steam and that
Yeah.
other things are starting to fall by the wayside. And for me, I didn't realize until all of a sudden my husband one day said, like, he wanted a divorce. And I was like, sorry, what was that word that you said? Like, I remember thinking, like, what rhymes with divorce? Like, I must have heard wrong. And long story short, like, just out of the blue, he wanted a divorce. And what I didn't realize is that I had been neglecting our relationship and neglecting our marriage because I was so focused on the business. I was putting out fires every single day. Even though I had a staff, it still came back to me at the end of the day. And I just, at that time, I had to do everything, right? Whether it's purchasing, whether it's driving, whether it's picking up days, or every single part of the business. So now it's like I was working so hard for the business and I was losing the person who mattered the most to me. I was losing my husband, my family. And so we ended up getting separated. And that was a very traumatic period in life for me because, again, I didn't want this. All I wanted to do in life was like be married. It's probably one of my biggest goals. And so the biggest goal that I had was like just slipping out my fingers, or there wasn't anything I could do about it. I couldn't get him to change his mind. I tried. And so that really broke me. And I was living in Antigua at the time and I was so depressed. I didn't really have a huge support system there because that's where my husband is from. But all of my family is from Canada. All of my friends are in Canada. So after trying to stick it out for a couple of months, I was like, my mental health, like, this is not working. And I was so depressed. I didn't even, like, I've heard of depression, but it's one thing to hear about it and it's another thing to like go through it yourself. And I could never have understood how painful depression could be. Like I never knew what it was like to be that low. Nothing super traumatic had ever happened to me in life before. And so I think I was just truly unprepared to ever go to such a low in life. So it really flattened me out. And eventually I had to close the business. I had to come back home, and I had to really pull myself together. And for a while, it doesn't happen right away. You can't just pull yourself together right away. That's the thing. Like when your life falls apart, you have to sit with the mess. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard because you have to still untangle things. So I had to work on, how do I close this business? How do I let go of my staff who've been believing in this business and have wanted, right? Like there were so many closed bank accounts. How do I figure out moving? Who do I tell? Who do I not tell? Because I was very embarrassed. Like I felt very ashamed, the idea of divorce. And I know that divorce is very common in society, but for me, at least, I mean, I didn't want to be divorced. So it was not something I wanted to share, right? Like I didn't want to be separated. So I would walk around like pretending everything was okay. People like, oh, how's your husband? I'm like, oh, he's great. And like, meanwhile, we're not even talking, right? And like that's like living a lie. Yeah. And like I'm a very authentic person. So I felt so uncomfortable doing that in the first place. And I was like, I can't keep living this lie. So everything's gonna fall apart. So I remember just like had to leave, and I come back, and it's just like you're sitting there and you're like doing nothing. You're just like at rock bottom. But then from there, it's like eventually you're like, okay, I gotta build myself back up. How do I get out of this? And so I started working with a wellness coach, and she was like, you gotta prioritize your own well-being. Like put him aside. Like, yes, you still want your marriage to work out, but like I was spending all my effort trying to get him to work on the relationship, trying to get him back. Can we go to therapy? Can we do this? Can we do that? All my effort was going towards fixing the marriage. And she was like, no, you've got to stop. Like, you've got to focus on fixing yourself. So, it was harsh words, but I was like, no, she's right. And so she was like, what do you even want out of life? Who are you? Like, you've forgotten who you are outside of being a wife. You don't even know who Natalie is. And that kind of hit me like, oh my God, she's actually right. Like, and then so she got me to do things like, who was I as a teenager? Who was I as a young adult? What kinds of music? What kinds of food? What are the things I did? What are the goals and aspirations that I have? And she's like, you have to start building like your own new life and your own pattern. And she's like, you get to start again. And she's like, I know you think it's the worst thing in the world, but she's like, this is actually a gift. Like you get to start again, but you get to be intentional. So you can create the kind of life you want. You can think about the values, the beliefs, the goals that you want. And now you know like what to go after. You can set up boundaries now. You can practice self-care. You can say no to things. So I started working on myself and just doing that work. Of course, I went to therapy and had to unwind a whole bunch of stuff there too, accept my own responsibility in the marriage kind of coming apart. And what's so interesting is that as I was on my own journey and just focusing on myself now, because that was one thing I learned is like, you can't control other people. And like, and you have to accept what you can and can't control. And I think a lot of times we spend a lot of time trying to control things that are out of our control. Yeah. And it gets you nowhere, and it's very draining, and it's very exhausting, and you're just left depleted and emotionally and mentally like broken. So once I just started focusing on myself and doing that, thankfully, like, you know what, my husband and I were restored. It's kind of a weird, not even sure how it happened kind of thing. It's like I had to go back to Antigua just for like maybe a month, and we had a conversation. And I guess while I was doing my thing, he was doing his thing. And somehow it just so happened, right? And so that's why I think it's important to let go sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's like I just have to trust that whatever's happening on his side, I was always hoping for reconciliation, but I couldn't guarantee it, obviously. He showed no signs of interest in it. But you just have to let go and surrender and, just focus on you. And even if we didn't get restored though, I know I would have been okay because I had started to build back that path. And I actually think that's why things got better, is because I realized I could do this without him. Whereas for the longest while I was like, no, I can't make it if he's not with me, So yeah, that's like my long-winded story, but I forgot what you originally asked me, but I hope that helps anybody who's listening. Maybe if they were able to take any kind of tidbit from there. Yeah.
Divorce is a tough thing. It really is. And I went through a divorce a couple of years ago, and I'd said to people, I didn't get married to get a divorce, but I sure as fuck didn't get a divorce to die. and didn't have the conversation that you had because I knew what the problem was internally with me, that I had abandoned myself and that I had codependency issues and there were problems within that. And it really takes us being self-aware to be able to see what those things are. But I really, really, really appreciate that you pointed out when you go through that shit, you have to sit in it. You actually have to be in it. You have to be dirty in it. You have to sit in the mud. You have to feel it. You have to taste it. You have to walk through it. You have to work through it. In this day and age, sometimes I feel like I sound like an old friggin' man, like back in my day. But in all reality, like everybody wants things so quickly right now. Like we want the problem, we want the solution, we want the prime delivery on every single thing. And that's not how this works. You need to do the fucking work and you need to actually work through it. And
it's hard. It's like, it's not easy work.
Oh.
It's hella hard and miserable every day. And you're like, why am I even doing this? And of course, sometimes depending on the severity, you might even question, like, is there a point? Do I even want to go on? But you got to pull from deep within somewhere. And sometimes you have to pull on other people's strength.
Right.
I just want to share that. Like, there was a point I had zero motivation to like, even to wake up and open my eyes in the morning. I was like, I can't do it. To brush my teeth, I'm like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I did have people in my life who were like, Natalie, pull it together. Like, get up, like, go wash your face. I'm coming over. We're going to go do this and go to therapy, sit and figure out what went wrong. What can you do better? And like, it's really important to have a support system, so that sometimes you have to lean on other people's strength when you just don't have it for yourself.
Yeah, you can't do it all on your own. It does start with you being self-aware to be able to say, I've got a problem or there's something going on, but you definitely need to be able to go through it. And I'm glad you got back to that, because I was going to ask, it sounded like there are some, or were some codependency that you had, along with some traumas that you had that probably came from how you were raised or just the experiences that you had that told you life should look this sort of way until you were kind of cracked open in a sense. Because when the divorce thing comes up, even if, like, I was the one who said it on my side, but for you to be able to get hit with that, it's still similar. It's a fucking line in the sand at that point.
Yeah.
You got to do something with it. So how did you go through and work through, and what did you find out? Were there deeper codependency issues or childhood traumas that you needed to get back to, and how did you work through those?
Yeah, I guess the good thing about that time of separation and like me having to deal with my own stuff is like dealing with things from childhood that I didn't even realize were present. So like, for instance, my mom, like, she's always believed in this idea of marriage. I think it was like her biggest goal for my sister and I, is like her two daughters are married and then she's successful in life.
Okay.
So somehow you end up growing up with this like expectation that, you know, you have to get married. And I did want to get married, but like, it was also taught to me, like, you have to take care of your husband, and like, that's the most important thing, and all of this. So it's like, it's just like these messages I got growing up. It's like my identity is connected to this role as being this wife, right? And I remember being like, I have to push back on that. And I had to, like, through therapy, talk to my mom, and I actually had to stop talking to her for a bit, actually, because it was like too many messages of like, oh, just fix it, and like, oh, just tell him you're sorry. And I'm like, don't you think I tried that? Like, you don't think that occurred to me, right? And so sometimes that can be really challenging too, is when other people are getting involved, but you just have to deal with your own stuff. And there does come a point where you have to kind of stand up for yourself and be like, listen, this is what I need, or this is what I need to do for myself, and like, everybody needs to respect that. And I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not going to ask for permission. Like, you just have to get to a point where you do what's best for you. And when you spend time with yourself, that's the good thing. Self-awareness only comes when you spend time with yourself. And like, for me, journaling was really, really helpful. And I'm not like a writer, so I was not really interested in journaling, but I did start, and just that release of ideas, that release of feelings and emotions, just getting it out was very helpful. And then I could start to process, like, how do I feel? Like, what is going on? How am I here? Like, because I remember for a long time, I just kept saying, like, why me? I'm like, I feel like I'm a good person. Like, I'm like, I don't feel like I did anything to really deserve this. I couldn't understand, like, how did I end up in this situation? Like, you know, you see other, like maybe on celebrities or other people, and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that they
Makes
were gonna
sense.
break.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's about time. I was waiting for that, right? Like, and so, but for me, as I said, I was blindsided. So I was like, it took me so long to realize, like, you can't take things personally. I'm like, it happened to me, it can happen to anybody. It's not because people are necessarily good or bad. It's just like the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And it's like, get out of your feelings and then, okay, deal with it, because I wasn't dealing with it for so long. And I remember, I remember that wellness coach. Remember, she said, he's gone. You need to accept it. And I was like,
Damn.
okay.
It got real cold.
Yeah, she just, she was like, stop telling these like lies and
Stories,
stuff.
yeah.
She's like, you've got to accept the truth. And I guess I wasn't. I was like in denial, and I kept hoping. And there's a difference between hope and being in denial, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can always hope for something to become better in the future, because there's always a possibility. I'm always an optimist. But at the same time, you do have to accept what is happening in front of you as is in the current situation. And I think that was helpful. Me being more present and just looking around and being like, yeah, she's right. Like, he is gone. Like, I really do have to deal with this. I really do have to figure out, how do I unwind? How do I open my own bank account? Like, you just have to figure out, how do you move forward? Like, you can't just stay in limbo forever.
Well, we as people constantly grow. We evolve and we change. And the person that you met and even fell in love with and married is different today than they were when you did that. Even if you got married last year or whatever. But it's being able to ebb and flow with yourself and with that other person, and have that empathy and understanding and compassion and loving, and still admiration at times, I believe, to be able to watch them kind of ebb and flow and work. But for a lot of people, I think what you're talking about is the thing that they go through. And I realized that when I had talked to some friends, people that had gotten divorces, people that had been in marriages for a long time. There are those little lulls. Like, every relationship has something like that. But
Yeah.
there are those people that just go, well, we just grew apart. And it's like, so you're basically telling me you didn't really do anything with it. You just fucking allowed it and let it be. And you're like, well, I guess we're done. And that's the end of that. And not to slam those people, but in all reality, when I hear that, I think you haven't done the work, or you would have a deeper response to it. Like,
Right.
there's something that's deeper there. And if you don't want to, it's okay. I mean, it's your life. You do whatever you want. But there are a lot of people that go through that, where, similarly to you, where it's like, well, nobody cheated on each other. You didn't kill me. There wasn't something crazy that happened that was like, oh, yep, that makes total sense. And it's hard to come to grips with that during the time frame that it's happening, but it's really hard to come to grips after the fact, because we as people look for things like that, right? Like, didn't you go through that? Think like, well, fuck, what was it? Was it it wasn't anything major, then how and why me? So speak to that. Talk to that person that is going through that, or listening to this now, going like, yeah, wife and I, or my husband and I, it's been a while, and I don't feel as connected, and I feel detached, and I just don't love them anymore, or whatever. But there's nothing majorly wrong. So how did
Yeah.
they get through that? How do they realize that? And then what the fuck did they do with it?
So for me, and I can only speak from my perspective, but for me, I think, like, I take marriage very seriously, and I take, and that it starts from there, because, to be honest, not everybody enters into a marriage thinking it's a lifelong commitment. Like, I know people who get married, and they enter into it as like a, we'll see how long this goes for. Like,
Isn't that what
they've been
dating?
very, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, you could have saved a lot of money,
Yeah.
but, like, like, I'm like, I guess so you have to think about that from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is your stance on marriage? Because I realize, like, even though society still does have, yes, marriage is once for life, we see people who are married 5 and 6 and 7 times. So society is also telling us the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So you try to make sure you and your partner are on the same path. But even if you are, it doesn't mean that somebody else can't change their mind, right? And so this is what I mean about what you can and can't control. At the end of the day, you can only control yourself. So if you feel like you're disconnected, or you feel like you're detached, it's like, what things can you do on your end to try to feel more connected? Like, is there efforts that you can put in on your own? And the thing is, I say on your own because a lot of times we try to change the other person, and we'll be like, I'm not getting enough affection from you, or you're not spending enough time with me, or I don't think you're as driven as me, right? And we're putting it all on them. But something I learned through this was like, okay, what can I do for my own self? How can I increase fulfillment on my end? And how can I increase like my output? So as an example, like let's just say I felt I wasn't getting enough affection. How can I show it more on my end?
Yeah.
How can I focus on my own joy? Because again, a lot of times I think your happiness is connected to that person. And so now like, because that person's like it's not working out well now, like you've completely gone by the wayside. And it's like you've got to still take care of yourself and work like during that time. I actually think if you work on yourself more, you actually become more attractive to that other person, and they're like, oh, I look at her, she's like dressing up, or she's like doing things for herself, she's learning new things, she's smiling more, she's happier, like, and then that can actually bring them back. But I think it's just like we try to force things. That like for me, I was trying to force him back, and it just was not working. So that can be my only like I'm not any expert, but that would be my suggestion: is that forcing a person to stay with you or to come back, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
That could also lead to a restraining order, jail time, a nice white coat in a circular room.
Yeah.
There's a lot to that. I find it interesting how, first off, you and your husband got back together.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing. And for you guys to be able to feel that and know that you went through what you went through and be able to have the relationship you have now, what a testament to that. So talk to what it looks like for you now to have that relationship, having gone through that.
Yeah, honestly, it's so funny because I never thought I would get to a point where I'd say this, because it's like when you're going through something, you don't see the other side of it. And everybody kept telling me like, oh, it's going to get better. And I was like, yeah, please don't talk to me. But anyways, what I've realized is that going through all of that, like now, like everything is better. Like we are actually, both of us are so grateful that we went through such a bad time. And it was a really bad time, because now we came back stronger, and we came back because we chose to come back to each other, as opposed to just staying together because we felt like we had to. Like this was a conscious choice to come back to. We were in two different countries. Okay, I was in Canada, he was in Antigua, right? So it was a conscious choice. So I think that intentionality, it's like if we could find our way back to each other through all of that, we know to never let things slip that much again, to ever get here again. So now it's like, of course, just like you said, you see lulls. If you notice something, one of us notices something now, it's like we'll speak about it quickly. Yeah. We'll try to address it quickly so that we don't have to go down that path again. And I think we've both just changed as people, like how we show up for our own selves, how we show up for others. Now we have a beautiful son. He's 2 years old. And so just so grateful like to have him in our lives. And he's like the example, right? He's like right in front of us. It's like
proof.
The proof.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like that is very meaningful to me. And I think now I just have a stronger desire to like, okay, push. And just to encourage other people too, because I think sometimes people don't share those stories, and it's like you're just, sometimes if you're hoping for hope, you want to see hope somewhere. Sure. You know.
Yeah. What a cool thing, and especially to have your kid that is the proof.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit at two different ends here, because I think we have a good dynamic where you and your husband went through the separation. There was a threat of divorce. Then you worked through it. You got to where you're at now, and you have the proof that it's worked. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that proof has a long life, just like you and your relationship, you know, and like that's a cool thing that you guys can look back at with grandkids or anything like that. The other side of that is where I was and what I went through, and where I'm at now. And I think, so I went through a divorce. We were together for 8 years. We were married for 8 years, so together for almost 9, something like that. When we went through the divorce, I remember being really upset, just like anybody would be, that I thought like I failed, and that's the end of that. Like I didn't get a divorce or a marriage to get a divorce. But I remember thinking, well, I failed, and thinking, no, I actually just need to do the work. Like I need to get in and do more of the work. And at this point, I now have my partner, who I believe to be my twin flame, my absolute match. And it's about 2 years or so removed since that situation happened. But there was a lot of work that went through that. I'm thankful for everything I went through because of where I'm at now and what I have now. I wouldn't have had that if I didn't go through the divorce, if I didn't go through the marriage, but especially if I didn't do the fucking work afterwards. And I'm not trying to be braggy or boastful. There was just some really dark times throughout all of that, and some really eye-opening times and things that I needed to do and go through. So for you to be able to go through all that you went through, you're back together, you have a kid, life is great, you are both growing and going through life together. I needed to go through that divorce to be able to get to the partnership and relationship that I have now that I feel I was actually supposed to have.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that space in between where I think there are some people in the audience that listen to this that are kind of unsure of like which one it would be if they were to
Mm.
get a divorce, or some people that are afraid of that commitment. If I get a marriage that is rough like my parents, then I
Yeah.
don't want to look like that. I don't want to be in that spot. Or somebody like yourself that had said, well, it was really important to my mom, and therefore it became something that I felt like I should do. And I think that's really the crux of all of it is like, no matter what you're doing, it shouldn't be something that you feel you should do for other people, even that other
Mm-hmm.
partner. It's a matter of you doing the work for yourself and being able to do that work and flourish through the rest of the relationship or into a new relationship. So, as you went through everything you went through and thinking about the perspective of you almost didn't have that. You didn't have where you were, but you do still have that as part of your history. What do you and your husband do that you feel actually helps you continue to set that foundation and continue to grow your relationship together that you probably wouldn't have done, if you didn't get back together?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and we're not experts, and it's not like our marriage is perfect or anything. But I do definitely feel like we are way more committed, like
Good. Good.
on a different kind of level. I think when you realize what you could have lost, like it's present mind still. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think now we're just like more open about communication, and or at least like I know on my end. Like before, it's like I don't know. I think we got married kind of young. We were like 25, and I like I don't know. We'd have all these silent periods, or if one of us got upset, we wouldn't talk to the other person, and like those things, and like. They always say like, "Oh, don't go to sleep upset," and I'm like, we went to sleep upset very several times. I'm not really sure if that okay, whoever that works for, fine, good for them. Sometimes for me, I've learned it's better to go because
Walk the
sometimes
fuck
I will wake
away.
up and it's better. Yeah. Because yeah, I think that depends on like a person by person situation. But anyways, overall, now I will engage in conversation sooner rather than
Yeah.
later. So I'm not gonna wait like a month or several weeks to be like, hey, what's up? It's like, hey, let's just check in. And now, even when we check in, I think just that acknowledgement of the check-in, it's actually easier for the other person to either bring up whatever their issue is or just release it and say, I don't want to talk about it, but like just give me some space and I'm going to be
Yeah.
okay. Whereas if we didn't have that check-in, they would just hold on to it and it festers. And that's the problem is when things fester and they get worse and worse and bigger in one person's head and the other person has no clue what's going on. And then how can you ever fix things, right? It's like you're on two different pages and you don't even know it. So I think those check-ins are really important, and just society doesn't allow us to spend as much time together with our loved ones as we'd like. Like people are working, people are busy, people have different hours, different schedules and stuff. But just finding a way to stay connected through that all. And you talked about like people grow at different paces and people
Hmm.
are interested in doing different things. And I think marriage is really interesting, or just a partnership in general, because you have your own goals, your own ambitions and desires, and so does that person. And in a partnership, it's like, how do we let both people thrive and go where they need to go, but can we also collectively still go somewhere together?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the thing, because sometimes you're on a path and the other person's like going the opposite direction, and it's like, well, good luck. But it doesn't mean you have to be hand in hand doing the exact same things. Like I think there's like a we can both be moving this direction, but like I'm in this lane, but we're both still going together. And it's just trying to figure out how to navigate both people's growth. Some people's might be really fast at certain points, and another person's a little bit slower. But if you're headed in the same direction, it's still okay. But I think we have to give grace to other people. Like we can't just assume our partner is gonna have the exact same drive or the exact same vision or the exact same hustle as us. We have to accept them for who they are and not try to change them into us. I think a lot of us, including myself before, you just want that person to be like the same like you, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like you have to let them be them.
Yeah. And if you have similarities, that's great. But also understanding that there are times where some of that will change, ebb and flow, just like your life goes. So, how is all this related to and impacted the way that you handle your wellness business?
Yeah. So, you know what? For me, I mostly work with women. So, I'm usually working with ambitious women. Most of them are entrepreneurs. Some of them are women professionals who might want to start a business or maybe not. But I am very empathetic towards women who are trying to balance it all or whatever it all is for them. And I feel like a lot of the women I work with just feel like disconnected, either from themselves, like they feel like they're on the back burner because they've put everybody else's needs ahead of themselves, especially if they're moms, then they're like, oh, the kids and oh, the partner and oh, the job and whatever. And they tend to put themselves behind. And then others, they just feel like, I guess, a lack of sense of direction. And I'm really empathetic towards that because I feel like when I was at my lowest, I had no clue, like, what do I even want out of life? But because I was able to spend that time with myself, I was able to figure out self-awareness and have that kind of blueprint, like a roadmap to move forward. Well, I built it as I go on. Like, this is now what I'm able to help like other women with. And so it's like supporting them and saying, hey, you can build a roadmap for the life that you want. And it doesn't mean that life is going to be perfect. Like,
Sure.
I can't offer that and nobody can. But if you at least have a vision, you have clarity on what it is you want out of life, it helps you make choices because you realize what's in and out of alignment for you. And it's all about the mindset, right? It's like if you have a mindset where you are like, I'm open to growth, I'm open to learning, I'm open to being flexible and adaptable, like you'll just go a lot further in life.
Sure.
But if you have this like mindset of like, oh, well, woe is me, like this happened to me and this is the fate that I've been dealt and I can't change it, well, then you're right. Like your life is never going to change, to be honest, because you're going to keep yourself down, right? So I think like that's the most work I actually do with women. It's on the mindset because once you can believe in yourself and believe in your dreams and believe in possibility, go where you want to. And I'm not saying you get there like the next day, but at
Sure.
least you can be confident that you're going in the right direction, and that alone brings fulfillment.
Oh yeah, and I think it goes hand in hand with self-awareness. It takes that mental fortitude to be able to have the self-awareness, but it also takes the self-awareness to be able to look at your mental strength and do something with it, and then start to kind of take the action from that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of mindset, and but I know
I threw
that it's not all about mindset though. And I've had some people call me out on that, like, oh well, you can't just mindset your way through everything. I'm like, yeah, especially when it comes to trauma. Like you actually have to get that shit out of your cells.
Yeah.
And you have to actually go through and process through it.
Yep.
But like you had said, you need to be able to be aware of that and have that attitude shift
Yeah.
within your mindset to go, all right, well, maybe there is a possibility, or there is something, or shit, maybe there is something that's holding me back that happened years ago that I'm just unaware of because I've locked it away. And when you really dig into it, I find it so fascinating how the brain is like, this shit's real and tough. You're not going to look at this. Here's some bubblegum stuff to look at.
Yeah.
Until you're ready.
Yeah.
And then be able to go through it.
You've got to push past. And that's the thing. Like, to me, mindset is just step one. Because with mindset comes action. And it's only if you take action on the things that you're learning, the things that you're discovering, can you make any kind of change, right? So it's like you can have the awareness of like, okay, I went through trauma. Okay, so what are you going to unlearn, and what can you do differently? What doors do you need to close? What people do you need to cut off? Who do you need to apologize to? Who do you need to forgive? Like, how do you move forward? And like, I think this is really why I got into coaching, because coaching is all about, like, therapy is great, but I found for me, it's like I could only do therapy to an extent because I'm like, I can't stay in the past. And I just felt like I'm like, I've dealt with it all, or at least all for now. But I'm like, I need to move forward now. Like, I can't just keep reliving the trauma. Like, I want to move forward. So like, coaching is action driven, and it's forward momentum of like, what can you do now that you have that information, now that you've done the work, you've healed, you've moved, you've done what you need to do, you've worked on yourself. How do you move forward and be a better version of yourself? Like, how do you make sure you don't have the situation repeat. Even like the childhood traumas, if you become a parent, how do you make sure you don't repeat those same traumas with your children, right? Or how do
Yeah.
you make sure that something you heal from, you don't reopen that wound like 10 years later and then go through the whole thing all over again.
Yeah.
So it's like being able to being intentional about putting preventative actions in place that you actually grow from this, and it's like, I would describe my experience of like that depression and that lull as like being in a pit. But it's like when I get out that pit, like I climbed up and I'm gone. Like I'm not coming back there. Like that is sealed up. I'm not going back there. And I have been very intentional about how I live my life so that I never do get back to that point. To be honest, like even if my husband and I were, God forbid, for something to happen to us and it didn't work out, like I don't think I'd ever get to that same low again, because now my whole identity is not like in him. Like, do you know what I mean? So I've healed like a lot of that already. So it's like, of course it would be a setback, but it wouldn't be as detrimental, I guess, to my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's only because you went through what you went through,
Yeah.
and the awareness and the wellness that you've gone through and all these things, they all stack together, but it takes us actually going through and kind of sifting through that shit. So along those lines, what's that one piece of advice you'd give to somebody on their path towards self-mastery?
I would say it's along the lines of self-awareness, but I would say spend quiet time with yourself. And the reason I say this is because a lot of times, like, we think of self-awareness or we think of self-help or personal development, and we're like listening to podcasts or we're listening to reading books and listening to TV and all that. And all of that's good. But there comes a point where you just need to quiet the noise, and like it's just like you and like yourself. And you just need to think, like you just need quiet, and you need to figure out, who are you? Like at the core, who are you as a person? What are your beliefs? What are your values? What are your goals? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Like you just need to reconnect with your own self. And I think you can only do that effectively from a place of solitude. I do suggest that if you can write it all down and just get a baseline for who you are or for where you're at in life, right? Like, because maybe you don't even know who you are, but like and maybe that's too deep to start with, but then just start with like, how are you feeling right now? Like when you assess your life, what are the different areas? How do you feel in your career? How do you feel in your finances? How do you feel in your spirituality? How do you feel in your relationships? How do you feel in your body? How do you feel your nutrition is? Just get a baseline for how you are right now. And then check in with yourself. How do you feel about where you're at right now? Like, are you pleased with it? Are you like, okay, I'm good. I'm happy to see this is where I'm at. Or are you concerned and you're like, oh man, like, I'm actually a little bit disappointed that I realize I'm so far behind in this one area. Or maybe you're surprised and you're like, oh, I'm actually doing really well in this area. I didn't even realize. But until you get a baseline and can kind of assess where you're at, it's really hard to figure out what to work on. Like it's like you need that data. Like you need you need information. And then whatever, when you've done that and you figure it out, then just choose one small area to start working on. Because I think in life, like sometimes we're like trying to do so many changes and we just want to become like a brand new person overnight. And it's like, no, it's not going to happen. We have to give ourselves grace. We're just people at the end of the day. And everybody's just trying their best. So give yourself grace, but think of like, okay, if there's one area that you realize like, I'm not that happy with this, what's one small step that I can take to improve my own self? What's one small thing I could do to work on myself? And that might look like external support. It might look like therapy. It might look like a coach. It might look like going to the gym. It might look like talking to a friend. It might look like getting outside. Like it's going to be different for everybody. But just figure out what's one small step you can take. And then once you figure that out, then do another small step and another small step. And just take yourself through that journey. We have resources. We have this podcast. We have YouTube. We have other podcasts. Like we have books. There are things that you can use to help you along that journey. But you've got to be the one to start it. Nobody can start that journey for you.
What a great way to end that. Hey, you're right. You're right. You have to do it. And it does take people, and it took me a long time to actually understand that. Just had to be able to do those things. And sometimes those things is just opening up to yourself. Saying this really sucks, or this hurts, or every time this happens, this makes me feel this sort of way, and working through that and understanding. Natalie, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, where can people find you and where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram, Natalie Mullin, and my website is nataliemullin.com, and also on LinkedIn. Guess what? Natalie Mullin. So yeah,
Awesome.
check me out. Oh, I also have my own podcast. It's called From a Full Cup. So it is a mental wellness and mindset and personal development podcast for women. But men, if you're listening, it's all good too.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. I was going to say, like, you can't forget that you're a podcast host as well.
I know. I almost did forget, but I remembered in the end.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.